When you first started working, what was your first job in India? And
the first job I ever had was after school. I left the school in 1942, and in 1943, at the age of 17, I joined the Royal Indian Air Force.
The Royal Indian
Air Force.
Right.
I joined them in 1943, March.
Right.
And I finished with the Air Force after being selected for the police in a selection, official selection. And I left the Air Force on what is known as a Class B release, essential services. And so I became a sergeant in the police and went straight to the police training school in Fallow, India, for 1 year.
And after that, what rank did they took you on as a sergeant, did they?
Yes, because of my Anglo-Indian heritage, I was taken on in the rank of sergeant, which is a 2-star officer, and 1 rank below inspector. And I did the 1 year in police training school, and meanwhile, this was 1946, and at the end of 1946, I went back to the Punjab.
Yeah, that was just 1 year before.
1 year before partition.
Before partition.
Yeah. And when I finished with the police training school, I was barely out of the school when the riots started, the famous riots of 1947 at partition.
And how old were you at the time when the riots started?
How
old were you, Lord?
When the riots started, I was 20 years old.
20 years old?
Yeah.
And you were sergeant?
I was a sergeant.
Right.
Yes, and I was a sergeant in Lahore, and the Additional Inspector General of Police, he was an Englishman. He had to go to Amritsar and he wanted 2 people as escorts. He selected me as number 1, and he selected another sergeant by the name of Ken Blunt as number 2, and we accompanied him. Ken Blunt couldn't take the pressure, so I was left with him alone in Amritsar. So I saw all the worst of killings in Amritsar for quite a while.
Do you remember the first killing you saw? Is it something that sort of...
well, I saw the aftermath of a killing. There was a bus company owned by an old Sikh gentleman, and he was visiting the Golden Temple. And I had been there on patrol, and had hardly gone a distance when there was a hubbub at the Golden Temple, and I went back, and this old man was lying with his throat cut right next to the holy tank in the middle of the Gurdwara, the Golden Temple. That was the first. But after that, I literally saw dozens, hundreds of dead bodies, and most had been killed by knives or swords. They were not shot.
And that would have been women?
Women, children, old men, young, no exception.
And was there much of a stench?
Yes, there was a stench.
There would have been, I suppose.
There was a stench. And one day when I was standing there, a man came round the corner and he was sort of moaning, but he was walking. He walked towards the police station. And as he passed me, I saw the hilt of a knife sticking out of his back. The knife had gone right into him. But he just walked to the police station and he collapsed over there. They sent him to the hospital, and I think he lived.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one of them. But the killings were absolutely amazing. And I saw the aftermath of one of the kaflas, which is a caravan in Urdu, kafla. And there must have been 100,000 people. And they were on the march to Lahore. And they'd hardly left Amritsar and came out in the open plain. And out of nowhere, about 30-40 men on horses with rifles, and they came and started shooting up the whole thing, and they shot men, women, children, cows, buffaloes, whatever they had, and out of about 100,000 or say 80,000, I think about 100 odd were killed, and this went all the way to Pakistan, so they all lost thousands and thousands.
And what actually was the job that the police had to do? Did they have to sort of separate the Hindus from the Muslims, because they would not have taken sides?
No, now the Muslims were going to Pakistan And the Hindus were coming, and Sikhs were coming back to India because they realized that it was very difficult to stay in Pakistan. The Sikhs had actually originally, most of them had opted to stay in Pakistan. They were from Gujranwala and places like that, and they had huge properties. Well, they didn't want to leave their properties, but they were forced out because they knew they would be killed. And trains came in, literally 100% dead, people in the trains. And the blood was coming out of the carriages like water. I saw that too.
Is it true that they say that some of the rivers were actually red with blood? Is that true, or was that just
I don't know about the rivers, but I can quite believe it, I tell you.
Ah.
I can quite believe that, yes. It was absolutely horrendous. There was, and I was with the colonel in the British Army. They were still here in Pakistan, the army in India. The British Army had not left India still, and but they were not allowed to interfere with the killings. And I was with this colonel, and he said, you know, Niblett, when I get back to England and I tell my stories of what I've seen and what you've seen, he said, nobody will believe us. We're lying. Because 2 million died and 3 million were wounded. So you can imagine.
Yeah. And after these events, like today when soldiers, go through
Yeah.
these horrific experiences,
Yeah.
the first thing they come back home and they send for counseling and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Did that exist in those days? Or if people in the forces, if their nerves were shattered?
I don't think there was any counseling of any kind. I don't think so. Even in the army. It wasn't a concept at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had to take it.
And they took it too?
They took it. They took it. Now that is a fact.
Then so partition ended in 47 as well, didn't it? It started and ended in 47.
Yes, it finished in 47.
Right. And then immediately after partition was over, were you in limbo with work? Like you were officially still in the Punjab police, but
no,
then the
I was
border
not
had
in limbo at all. I had managed because I discovered that my mother with my 2 sisters and my uncle, who was the deputy superintendent of police, they were in the hall. And I was in the Indian side of the border.
And what was your uncle's name?
My uncle's name was Aubrey Pashong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Righto. Yeah.
And they were in what became Pakistan, Lahore.
Yes.
And I was in the Indian side. So since I had nobody in India, I opted on the form to go to Pakistan.
Obviously, yeah.
And when I arrived in Pakistan and I went to police headquarters, I was told, your mother and your 2 sisters have gone with your uncle to India. He opted for India. So I said, now I was in the same boat as before. Nobody in Pakistan or everybody of mine in India. So that's how it was at that time.
But and your career went okay in Pakistan?
My career went
you
very
had no
well in
regrets,
Pakistan,
you
yes.
had no regrets.
After all, I was a sergeant then, and then that was over. Then I went to a couple of stations, Sargodha. I went to Hyderabad, Sindh, which is a desert city. And I went to Karachi police on deputation. And I had risen by then to the rank of deputy superintendent of police. Right. And I was in Karachi as a DSP. Then I was in charge of all the motor transport, etc. in the Punjab. And I was still a DSP. And then in in about 76 I became a superintendent of police, and I was in charge of Lahore as the additional superintendent of police Lahore, and which is the capital of the Punjab. And then in 1976 I was sent to Japan for training for 3 months, traffic training, which is of course
Sent to
not
Japan.
applicable to Japan, not applicable in Pakistan, I must say, because there was no question of us being able to copy the Japanese. They were too far advanced. We didn't have that. And so then in 76, while I was still in training in Japan, my son wrote me a letter and said, Dad, you've been promoted to the rank of DIG. So I didn't believe him. because you do not promote an officer who is not in the country. But lo and behold, my son then said, okay, and sent me the letter of promotion.
Ah.
Yeah, photostat copy. He said, yeah, how about this? So then I knew I was a DIG.